Okay guys, thank you for joining me. In today's video, we're going to look at variables. Okay, so if you haven't subscribed to the channel, remember to click the subscribe button. Okay, so let me get into this tutorial. Okay, first things first. Variables are an important concept. They are one of those building blocks that you find in programming, in almost every programming language. All right, so if you're coming from a different programming language, you might be, like surprised on how Python variables are created. So the first thing you want to understand about variables, they are just containers, okay? So they are containers where you can store your data. In programming, we are always dealing with data. It might be numerical data, it might be text-based data, it might be photos, it might be, videos and stuff like that. So you need sort of like a container where you can store that data. So what actually happens, you get to reserve some space in memory where you're going to store that particular data. All right, so how do we create variables in Python? Unlike in other programming languages like Java, like C++, where you have to, to explicitly state the type of data that you're going to put in that variable. For instance, if it was C++, you have to specify like int. Let's say I'm keeping a score of a game, so int score. And then this is called declaration. I've declared a variable, right, in other programming languages. And then when I want to use this, now I can go on to use this and assign it a value, right? But in Python, we don't need this line, okay? We don't need declaration in Python. So take that off, okay? So the beauty of Python is easy syntax, okay? Straightforward syntax, okay? So that's why I love Python. All right, so in Python, you can just write this down. You don't need declaration, okay? You just have to create a variable like this. So you give it a name and a value, right? A name and a value. So score is the name of this variable and 0 is the value of this variable. Okay, so the equal sign is not an equal sign as in mathematics equal, x is equal to y, or it's not like that. This is an assignment operator here. It's assigning, this value is being assigned to this name. Okay, so it's more like they're taking this value and putting it into this name, okay, this container, like I said. So in this score, we have a value of 0. Okay, so why do we need variables? Why should we store, data in sort of like a container and stuff like that? Obviously, maybe later on we want to use this score, so we need to store this in a variable. Okay, so each time now we want to use this container, we just refer to it. Okay, so for instance, I want to print this score. Now I can print score. Okay, like this. And then when I run this, build it, boom, I have a 0. Okay, let's say I want to increment this score. I'll just say score is equal to score plus 10. Let's say maybe I'm adding 10 to the score each time I do something in the game, or each time I lose something in the game, I have to, to deduct 5. So score minus 5. As you can see, the first line will give me 10. We add 10 to this score, and then the second line, this line is going to deduct 5 from this 10, and then overally we're going to have print score. Now let's see the score now. All right, if I run this, build this in tools, build, down here you'll see a 5. Okay, so now I've got a 5. So as you can see, the value is always changing, right? It's always varying. It's sort of like there's a variation in the value, so that's why probably it's called a variable, because you can always alternate. You can always alter what is in your variable. You can always change the value. You can manipulate the value. You can add, you can subtract, depending on what is inside your container. Okay, so let's look at how you can name variables in Python. All right, the naming convention. It's really straightforward. Like I said, the first thing you need to keep in mind, it's always advised that you should name your variable in a descriptive manner. So a descriptive simply means what is it that you want to store here? Okay, okay, it's the score, so name it score. If you have a variable where you want to keep names, okay, right, give it a name, names, and then you can always keep your names here. Okay, it's just like that. Okay, if you have a variable where you want to keep numbers, you could say numbers and equals to blah blah blah. You know, it's straightforward. So that is one of those, you know, sort of like convention. You are encouraged to do that in Python. All right, and then one more thing you need to remember when you are naming Python variables, there are certain things you're not allowed to do. Okay, for instance, you're not allowed to start your variable name with a number. Okay, so I cannot say 9 score like this. This is not allowed in Python. If I try and print this, it's going to raise an error. So let's assign this a value of, let's say, 10. Let's say 9 score is equal to 10 and try and print 9 score. If I try and print 9 score, yep. And then as we shall see down here, tools and build, as we shall see down here, we have syntax error. Okay, invalid syntax. This is not allowed. Okay, so that's one thing you have to keep in mind. The second thing you have to keep in mind is you have to know what characters you're allowed to use. Okay, so in Python you're allowed to use, let me put them down here. You are allowed to use lowercase a to z. You can choose any letter here from a to z to name your variable. You can choose uppercase a to z. It's allowed. You're allowed to choose any uppercase between A and Z. You're allowed to do that. You're also allowed to use digit 0 to 9. But keep in mind that you don't have to begin your name with a digit. But for as long as you include it in that name, it's still legitimate. You're allowed to do it. It doesn't raise any errors. And then you're also allowed to use an underscore. All right, so when is the underscore applicable? Let's say I have a variable called my score. My score. These are 2 words, right? These are 2 words, my score. These are 2 words. So if I want to make it clear to anybody who cares to read or to go through my code, I will say my underscore score. Okay. So now somebody can understand, okay, oh, this means my score. All right, unlike if I didn't put anything here, this might confuse somebody. Okay, so you have to be clear when you're naming your variables. It's either you can use underscores or you can use camel casing. Camel casing simply means you capitalize every word. Okay, let's say I had my score football. So if I had my score football here, that simply means normally the first word you don't capitalize it, you leave it like that, and then you start capitalizing every word after the first one. So what simply happens here is my is the first word, so you don't need to capitalize. Score is the second word, you capitalize it. Football is the third word, you capitalize it, so it becomes my football, my score football. So anybody who cares to read this would know what I'm talking about. Okay, it will be clear. Unlike if I didn't put any, if I didn't capitalize these 2 words, this is kind of confusing to somebody who goes through this word. They will go like, oh, what's this word? Okay, they won't understand what I'm trying to say. All right, so stick to this. And then you are also not allowed to use white spaces. Let's say I have my football score. If I put spaces here and assign this a value, let's say I have a value of 20. Let me comment this out so that we don't run into an error here. So let's see this, my football score. If I try and print this, print my score football, which is not allowed, by the way. Okay, if I try to build this, you will see my score football, there's syntax error, invalid syntax. So no white spaces when you're naming your variables, right? So that's why we have to use an underscore here. Okay, so it's as simple as that. That's what you have to follow. Okay, so you can always play around with these variables, and there's a whole lot of stuff that you can learn about variables. So for today, we're just looking at how you create our variables in Python, how we assign values in Python, and what is the equal sign all about. The equal sign is an assignment operator. You need to remember that. Okay, we can also check the type of a variable by using we use the type function in Python. Okay, so the type function, print type, like that, and then you pass in the variable inside that those parentheses. Right, so type score, we want to check what type. Try and run this project too. Build. As you can see, I have a class int. So this score is a class integer. 0 is an integer value. So that tells you that Python variables assume the type of the value that you place in them. Okay, score is an integer value. All right, so I hope you guys understand, and I believe you guys can do a little more research on how you can use variables, how you can manipulate variables, and how useful variables are. But I'm really sure you understand. If you want to be a proficient programmer, you have to master how to use variables. All right, so thank you guys. Thank you for your time. I'll see you in our next video. I'm out. Boom.